Reactotron kind of came about when Steve and Kevin were having a conversation about things they disliked about the Chrome debugger for React Native. And Steve kind of took that and ran with it, and that's what we ended up with, this tool here. It is a tool that gives us a lot of extra functionality for inspecting things like Redux Sagas, like API requests. We can subscribe to state. There's cool features in it that we use a little bit less often, but are awesome too, like the image overlays and benchmarking and stuff like that. So this is kind of our landing page to tell you all about it. That's at Infinite Red /Reactotron. You can see that. And then it's very well documented. There's all sorts of different information about how to install, how to use it with React.js, how to enable the different features. And we also, at the last Chain React Conf, our very own Darren Wilson gave a whole presentation on it that is, he's a better speaker than me. So if you get a chance, check that out. I'm just going to kind of jump into what it looks like. The easiest way to get started with Reactotron, because we also build Ignite, is to just start your app with Ignite. I've done that already, so you don't have to watch me compile. And I've got an Ignite Andros app, just like a fresh one here. Ignite is our CLI for generating React native apps from boilerplates. So Andros is the first boilerplate we released, and we have another one, Bowser. The biggest difference is Andros is Redux and Saga based. No TypeScript, just plain JS. And Bowser is TypeScript, and we use MobX state tree. So I'm going to show you kind of how Reactotron can make inspecting both of those state management systems more pleasant. So this is actually, this is Reactotron. And when you first start up your app, it's going to start filling in the timeline with everything that's going on. It looks like I lost my connection, so you might have to watch me compile after all. So let me kill that really quick. Yeah, it runs on all the platforms. So yeah, it's an Electron app. Might need to actually restart it altogether. All right, so you get all of this this wonderful data. This is if you're coming with Ignite, right? So it's already configured. You can see right off the bat, it gives us some information about this connection that was established, and we get a bunch of different information about the device, like what's the platform, what's the OS, all sorts of stuff you'd get with maybe like React Native device info or something like that. I configured this one when I ignited the app with Redux Persist, so you can see that it's rehydrating state here. These are actions that it's logging. And then we have a startup action, which is a saga. This is what just a typical Reactotron log would look like. But you can also log objects, and they look pretty. And then you can do even more fancy stuff with your display, where you could have a bunch of nested data. And then you can see that this saga didn't do much. It just selected an avatar, so one effect. But we have all of that just with this freshly ignited app. So how does that all come together and work? Well, in Reactotron config here is where we set it all up. And there's not all that much to it. Once you've installed Reactotron React Native, you can configure it to name your app. You tell it that this is going to be a React Native app. I also have this thing configured to do storybook switching, so we'll get to that a little later. And then you can tell it to use a bunch of different middlewares or plugins so that you get that extra functionality. So for us, that was this Redux plugin so that we can see what's going on with Redux state. And then we have a Saga plugin so that we can log what's happening with our sagas. We do this kind of cute little hack here to add it to the console object so that we don't have to import it everywhere later on. Yeah. And then most of those logs that you saw were actually happening in this startup saga that we launch when the app first boots up. So you can see that hello, I'm an example of a log. That was just consoletron.log, so simplest example. But you can also log entire objects. And then if you want to do something a little bit more complicated, there's a display method that will let you name it, give it kind of a short preview, and then you can put a ton of different data in there if you're really trying to debug a whole bunch of different things all at once. Beyond just doing normal logs, we can also observe state. I must have to see if I can remember exactly which one this was supposed to be, because with the Redux stores, I think that I can just observe the whole thing by doing that. Yeah, so if I just do star, I can see all the state in the entire app as it is right now. And I can drill in and see what's going on with it. This is a subscription, so as things change in the app, it'll just update automatically. I guess it found a whole bunch of random words. This is probably the feature that we use the most, just to see what the state is. You can take snapshots of different states and replay them later. Add backups, yeah. And then there are these React Native specific features, which are pretty cool, where we can actually drag an image in here, and that will overlay on top of the the app. So if you're developing a screen and you actually have a mock-up from the designer, you can drag that, that file over here. You can mess around with the config to make it fit just right. You can kind of mess around with the opacity if you feel like having it more or less. You just want to see what, then you can just ship that. So that's a pretty cool feature. It gets pixel perfect. Yeah. And then we really like to use Storybook at Infinite Red. And this is a pretty cool feature that's fairly new. It's been around a little while, but it hasn't been fully integrated into our Ignite boilerplates yet. So there's a little bit of setup involved with that, but it's not much. And then one caveat is Andros is running a little bit of an older version of Storybook, so I need to get that going. You can switch to show your storybook right from Reactotron. And then poke around. Oh, about Storybook, yeah. So Storybook, it is like a component library for your app. So let me give an example of how that works. Yeah, so in this one, we have like a full button, right? And this component, we want to show a couple of different ways that you can use it. So yeah, you could say like Swagger for APIs is Storybook for components. Oh yeah, yeah. Um, so anyways, you can just toggle it from here, and then you can kind of poke around and see all of the different beautiful components that have been epic styles there. So beyond that, we've also, oh, I was going to show actually how that gets set up in here. So to add that Storybook support, and this kind of shows just like how easy it is to actually add like these plugins. All that I had to do was in my React config, just tell it to enable that functionality. That comes actually like baked into the React Native functionality now. Sometimes there's a completely separate thing, but and just set it up to, that's not the best view, is it? It's the index.js. Just needed to import my storybook into my entry file here, and then wrap the Storybook UI with the Storybook Switcher here, which returns a function that I can then pass my root component into and switch between the two of them. So pretty straightforward. The Storybook Switcher? Oh, that, so that's, if you're using an Ignite app, that'll be set up for you already. This is just coming straight from Storybook React Native. We just set up that other app. It's basically another React Native app that just displays just your components instead of your components in the context of your app. And you can customize like the way that looks and stuff. This one's pretty stock. But, so that's like Reactotron in an Andros app. If you use like Redux Sagas. Be pretty helpful. We also have it working in our Bowser app, so we can go there. Or Bowser boilerplate, I should say. So here's Bowser, and it looks like I might need to grab a different connection. Oh, so this is actually another thing, is you can connect pretty much as many devices as you want to Reactotron at the same time. So you could have an Android emulator going and a simulator. You can actually hook this up to a real device too. So if you wanted to have a bunch of real devices all tethered to your machine, you could be logging all of them in Reactotron at the same time. The only thing is you just gotta like come down here and switch between the connections. So you tell it what you actually want to see in the timeline. Yeah, so if you're connecting to a real device, if it's the main thing that you're gonna have to do is in the Reactotron config. So like in that Andros app we were in, it doesn't actually have that part of the config. So in this configure, you could tell it what the host is. And a lot of times when you're connecting to a real device, you're gonna have to switch that to your IP address. That's the only real caveat to that. Otherwise it works just out of the box. But, and so with Bowser, we get a lot of the same info. This one is using MobX state tree, so it's giving us our initial state, which isn't that interesting for that state tree. And it is showing a MobX state tree action here. And we also have a subscription that it added, which this is still for the old one. And I think my machine is like been running too hot for too long. So let me try that again. Yeah, I can't even refresh my simulator. Uh-oh. All right. And then I can do the same thing here to see all of the state that's in my tree, subscribe to it. I can do the whole thing all at once like that, or if I wanted to see what's going on in a particular store, I could just subscribe to just the state in that store. Once I make a subscription, the updates to that start showing up in the timeline as well. And you can drill down into those as far as you need to. I'm entirely sure. Try to. There's more console logs coming through earlier, so. There we go. So you can see like navigation state changes. It dispatches some actions. Subscriptions change. I can do this. That's what I was looking for, this demo Reactotron button. So I can hit that, and we can see those kind of different ways of logging. So this would just be a Consoletron log or Reactotron log. This would be log important. You can actually highlight things. I find this really useful when I'm using this to, once you have like a real production app and there's so many different logs happening, being able to log important and have it highlighted, that helps a lot. Highlighted like that. Another thing that you can do to help with that is there's filters by different types of logs that come through. Or there's just a plain like text search functionality where you can match to the actual like log that's coming through. All those things can kind of help find it. A lot of times when we're building a service or something like that, we'll use the Reactotron display feature, which lets us give it that name and kind of highlight it with this like this tag like that to call attention to it. I'm trying to think of one like analytics or something like that. We would have like a log function where we're just feeding that into console to the Reactotron. Another cool thing here is you can actually display images if you use the display method. So if for some reason you just want to actually see what the image looks like without having to like open a browser and paste it in there, that's handy. It also does emojis. Beyond that, I don't know, any questions? Maybe. That's take a snapshot. So I make it back. I might have about this. All right, I think that kind of did it. It's just like there's not enough state in this app to like really, let's see. So there you go. So I go back to this screen, right? I took this snapshot on the previous screen and yeah, just click it and I'm back to that screen. Yep. Yeah. If you stop running the app, right. So, I mean, it persists across just like rebooting the app there. I'll be kind of surprised if it persists from that. That's kind of what I was wondering too. Like kill it and restart it. I doubt it. Yeah, it's gone. Yeah. Yeah, those are the two that we support right now. it's totally possible to add more. So if there's something that you want to support, then by all means add an issue to Reactotron, and if it gets enough traction, we'll work on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see, Bowser. It's going to be in Reactotron config like that. Well, this is actually just setting up the initial config. It's actually in this file. So we have this setup method that gets called, I believe, from the setup root store. So there's a bunch of config. This one's a lot more complex than the Andros version. And part of that is to just make it do all of the things it does for MobX state tree, tracking the nodes and stuff like that, and giving us kind of nice labels on things. Little extra customization went into this one. So this is where the actual like MobX state tree plugin gets added. There's this use function on Reactotron where we can give it a plugin, and then you can configure that plugin if that plugin supports different configurations. In this case, we're just filtering out two particular actions, you could say. We don't actually want to see every post-process snapshot that happens, so we just tell it, you know what, that's okay, we don't need that. Yeah, it's much simpler. Those two boilerplates come with this. The one that you're showing right now is Bowser, which is TypeScript and Android's previous is Redux Sagas. Mm. So we use these actually as to build client projects, whatever the latest version of one. And actually, there's this clear here. So I think if you got rid of this, even on complete like refresh of whatever you're doing, you wouldn't lose those snapshots if you got rid of that. We just have it set up that way because most of the time we do want to clear stuff out. Bowser actually has another cool feature set up in it that is not set up in Andros right now. I believe there's a little bit of like parity between the two boilerplates that's not there, but this command middleware, you can actually configure commands that you can run from Reactotron. So this one has two different commands. It's got reset store and reset navigation. So the way that those work is you can run any like arbitrary code there. Right now I'm kind of like deep into the app, so why don't I just reset navigation? So I can just reset navigation. That was command period to open up that custom command palette thing. And then if I hit enter, I'm back to the original navigation state when you first load the app. We use this probably, like this and subscribing to state are the two most like used features for day-to-day for us. So like for instance, you might have a couple of different test users that you log in with all the time. Very easy to set those up as commands if you've got like some login action to kick off. You might have it for setting up some different states. Like I was recently working on a feature where we want to show modal if there's this state or that state, it shows a different modal. So I could change the states with commands, have the different modals pop up, make sure things were working properly. Basically, anytime you want to like repeatedly do something while you're doing development, you can just add another command. This file tends to grow pretty large as projects go on. Probably one of my favorite features in Reactotron. There's features that I've used less, so I'm just going to go to the documentation on them. One of those is benchmarking, and that is totally built in. So if you were in one of our boilerplates, this would be consoletron.benchmark instead of Reactotron benchmark. But you can add steps, stops, and then you can see how slow each part was. And you get a nice little readout like that that looks very similar to like what you might see when you're profiling things in Chrome. Our networking stuff that I was showing you, where you can see like an API request, is actually using this Reactotron API sauce plugin, because API sauce is a library that we have that kind of wraps Axios and gives us a simpler API for doing our requests with. That's pretty simple to set up as well. I could probably find the code in Bowser that does this, but that's basically what it looks like. You just add a monitor and let it know what's up. There's also an open an editor feature, so that you can actually just click on a line of code in a stack trace and go straight to that line of code in your app. Don't know if there's also just a plain Reactotron React Native networking. So if you're not using API sauce and you're just setting this up on an existing app, you'd want to use this networking layer. It's going to give you similar content to what you get with API sauce, but probably not quite as detailed. I think that about covers all the features. You can also use it with React.js. Might not be quite as many benefits there just because Chrome's already really good, or a lot of browsers already have really good debugging tools. The main thing that you're getting with this, though, it would be the plugins for like the Sagas and mob state tree, restoring from snapshots commands. That's all stuff that you'd have to install a browser plugin for Chrome to do. And if you like having a separate window for your debugging content so it's all in one place, you might like this more. So any other? You can edit state. Yes, you can. All right. Did I lose my states? All right. Let's see if got the right stuff. Oh, there's also a help tab down here so that you can, with all the different keystrokes for different quick navigation, snapshots, dispatch. So what I want is dispatch action, which is really what edit state, like it's going to still have to go through an action, right? And I just need to know what that action is. So it'd be navigation store reset for me. So I can just do Command D to dispatch my action. And if I remember the right shape for it, it's probably not going to work, but I'm sure I'm doing this wrong. type. Yeah, can't be right. I think it would be easier. I don't usually dispatch them that way because I usually already have made a command. So, because this one, you kind of have to know the shape of it. If you're doing Redux, it makes more sense because you usually already have, you can like copy and paste it. But within MobX state tree, which is what I have open right now, then you have to remember what's the raw shape of that action. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you can quickly clear the timeline if you want. I guess you can even toggle the sidebar. So I can just do. If you don't like that sidebar, it can go away. Um, Pretty much never anymore. The one thing right now with the API sauce plugin, you don't always get all the extended headers, and so sometimes if you're doing something that's like really custom, that's on. It's only one direction. You get it on the response, you don't get it on the request. So, but that's very rare. And the other thing would be connecting to a really old Android device, which is just a pain in the first place, because Chrome has all the hacks to make it happen over Wi-Fi and everything. With the underlying React Native debugging tools, sometimes have to resort to that. But yeah, I would say I almost never open Chrome debugger for debugging. It's when I start to like wonder if there's something I'm missing. But usually, once I look into it, I'm not. So, nope, you can't set breakpoints right now. Um, I wonder if that would be something that we've talked about before. I don't know if it's on the list or not. That would be kind of cool though. It's definitely not like something that it does right now though. Yeah, yeah. Yep. Yeah, you could do that too. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I actually drilled into one of these that actually had much info, but there's a API request with all the headers and everything. Yeah, yeah. So that was that. So we always use API sauce in all of our stuff, but if you're not using API sauce, then there is also a networking plugin, and that just actually lets you track all XML HTTP requests in React Native. So if you're just using Fetch, that'll work. Um, Probably not quite as nice of output as the API sauce stuff, just because we use that more, so we've refined it more. But yeah. Yeah. Um, and it's still in active development. So I know that there was talk about doing something nicer for GraphQL, because we have a few projects that have used GraphQL, and we love GraphQL. I would kind of like one that's like almost an Apollo plugin or something like that, because then you can maybe hook it up to Apollo Link State or something like that. That's something we thought about. Um, if there's any like thing that you could think of that would be cool, like we welcome opening issues for feature requests, and especially PRs with features. But yeah, uh, all sorts of different things going on with this. I know Rich has been hard at work on this. Yeah. Mocking responses? I suppose you could definitely write a plugin to make it happen. So when we use API sauce, we actually have response transforms where you could totally add like a transform to API sauce to accomplish the same thing, and then you could hook that up with a custom middleware through Reactotron to toggle it. So you could do something like that. It just, yeah, it doesn't exist like out of the box right now, but it wouldn't be too hard to set up. Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. We were actually talking about doing something similar on my project right now because we have end-to-end tests that have to go through WebView flows that you can only actually access on their dev site through VPN, which makes setting up CI a real pain. And so we were thinking about just mocking all of the network traffic for those end-to-end tests and something like that. Like if you could also test it through Reactotron, would be awesome. So maybe that'll be coming sooner than later. Might be useful. So. Yeah, we have some additional far out plans for additional paid features. This will always stay open source, but some other things that I think that we should who want to have a little more insight into that. Yeah. Long-term roadmap. Yeah. Yeah. So setting up Storybook itself is a bit more work, but again, if you use Ignite to, like either boilerplate that we provide, Andros and Bowser both have Storybook set up for you. The actual setup for that in Bowser looks kind of like this. You've got a Storybook directory, which just has this entry file, which gives you the Storybook, and then that's the setup here. Get Storybook UI comes from Storybook itself, and you just tell it what port you're going to be serving your stories on. And then we have splash screen involved on this one, so we make sure it's hidden. And then I believe this is to actually expose Reactotron in our stories, because we were doing things where we actually wanted to be able to log issues from our story components, I guess. That was for snapshot tests or something. And so then it's just a really simple component, this Storybook UI, and then you register all of your different stories. I wish this was a little bit simpler, but you can't really do dynamic requires in React Native. So yeah, yeah, you just end up with a whole bunch of different components that get brought in. The story files. We have a little bit of extra setup in here so that you can customize the different storybook components themselves. So there's the screen that it's in. We made that like keyboard avoiding view so that if you're working on an input, it actually moves things out of the way. The story itself is a pretty simple scroll view wrapped inside a view. And each story has many use cases, and this is probably where we customized the look of it the most. And so you can get in here, and if you want to make it look branded, you know, or whatever you're doing, you could make it look just a lot more simple, like your app. So it looks like they're more in context. We use this like no background feature all the time for if you have something that's transparent. You can set the background color of the component, or you can use no background color. Like, you can kind of configure it so that you can actually see what's going on. You can also add or remove padding to it. So that's just all Storybook itself. Once you have Storybook itself set up, though, this was all that I had to add to Andros to do it. If I had done that on Bowser, the one thing that you'd have to do in Bowser is the load order by default doesn't set up Reactotron before setting up the root component, so you would just have to switch that around so that Reactotron was already set up. Then you can have the Storybook Switcher consume your root component. But yeah, like one option in the config there, and then basically an import and one line of code in the entry file to get the Storybook Switcher. So. Any other questions? Or? Oh, Ignite. Okay. We have a landing page for that too, right? Is that just Infinite Red? Yeah, this turned into kind of like a half Ignite presentation. That was just because, like I said, it's the easiest way to get set up. It's not that it's hard to set up Reactotron. In fact, let me go to the install really quick just to like clarify. Like installing it itself, you can install via Homebrew if you want, or there's a whole releases page for all the different platforms. You can grab a DMG for Mac with the latest kind of whatever way you want to install the actual application. And then starting, like, if you're not using Ignite, it's really as simple as adding Reactotron React Native, or this would be Reactotron React.js if you're doing React.js. And then you just have your configure, use which version it is, and connect. That's it. Of course, you can tweak it to your heart's content at that point. We just kind of do that for you if you use Ignite. So to answer your question, Ignite is our CLI for generating React Native projects. There's actually, I think, a GitHub issue I saw that was like, why don't you guys do this for React too? Which we totally could. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, basically Ignite, it's a tool to help you spin up a React Native app as quickly as possible and give you all this stuff pre-configured that we use for our like our day-to-day. So just to kind of show how I created this, I'll just do like a new one. Why not? So that would just be ignite, new, and I'm just going to call this one Bowser 2 because I'm not feeling too creative. And you can select, we have like 2 boilerplates that we've provided. You can create your own boilerplate if you want. And there's a bunch of other boilerplates that there's a list somewhere. It's probably on the Ignite CLI page. I can't remember exactly where, but Andros is just React Navigation, Redux, and Redux Saga, and Bowser is React Navigation, Mobix State Tree, and TypeScript. So you do Bowser, then let's just go through all of the steps to get everything that was in here. Andros setup. So all that Storybook config I was showing earlier, that's all just like standard Bowser app. So yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think we may have even talked about that before, like being able to use Reactotron more in a testing context to just push state, and then yeah, like you're saying, like take a screenshot of what the state looks like, and then do a visual regression or something as kind of a cheap end-to-end test. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, or I mean, even just comparing a snapshot before you run an action to a snapshot after, and having like action snapshot tests. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah, totally. Um, yeah, like I said, issues on GitHub. Those are all good ideas. Um, yeah. Anything else? All right. Yep, that's all I have. All right, thanks.